All right. In my opinion, this is by far the biggest Supreme Court ruling to come out in a long, long time. This has tremendous political implications for the near future, for the far future, really, because I don't see them changing their decision anytime soon, especially with the current makeup of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court on Tuesday issued a major ruling on money in elections. By a vote of 6-3, the justices struck down a federal law that limited the amount of money that political parties can spend in coordination with a candidate for office. The majority opinion, written by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, agreed with the challengers that the coordinated expenditure limits violate the First Amendment. There are certain campaign finance rules that we have in the United States, right? You're not allowed to donate a literal unlimited amount of money to a specific candidate. Say you're a billionaire, for instance, you're not allowed to donate $500 million to a specific senatorial candidate to run for office in that election, right? It's just simply not allowed. And for good reason, right? If you could donate unlimited amounts of money to specific candidates, it would there's a number of different problems with that, right? One, it would turn all elections into just a complete money game, which it kind of already is, and especially after this ruling, and I'll explain how, is really very much a money game. But it could also create quid pro quo problems, where like essentially you say, all right, Mr. Potential Senator, I'm going to give you $100 million for your campaign, but in exchange, I want you to push for this specific tax cut or these specific regulations on this specific type of business that I so happen to own. It's supposed to try and prevent corruption and pay-to-win tactics within federal elections. Right now, for federal candidates, either the president, the U.S. Senate, or the U.S. House, if you're running for any of those, you're only allowed to donate $3,500 per election cycle per candidate, right? And you could do $3,500 for the primary and $3,500 for the general election. So effectively, you're only allowed to donate a maximum of $7,000 to a specific candidate for a specific election. So say you really want President Donald Trump to win in 2024, you were only able to directly donate up to about $7,000 to him total for the election. So this isn't removing that cap. There is still a cap on how much money you're allowed to directly donate to a specific candidate for a specific election. What this removes is the coordinated expenditure cap that currently exists between parties and federal election candidates. And what does that mean? Well, not only is there a limit on how much money you can directly donate to a specific candidate, but there's also a limit on how much coordinated spending can happen between the national parties and specific candidates. And so, for instance, in Texas, the Republican Party, the GOP, or the Democratic Party are only allowed to spend $3.15 million in coordination with their specific Senate candidate. These limits are based on like an algorithm, a calculation that's made in committees, and it's agreed upon in the Senate. And they're determined based on population, upon the size of the state, upon a number of different factors. It creates a scenario where the national parties, the GOP or the Democratic Party, can't just dump unlimited, unrestricted amounts of money into a specific candidate. This is the restriction that they're removing. They are now allowing national parties to do unlimited coordinated spending with their specific candidates. There's no longer any sort of cap for what the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, or I guess any other third party, but they don't really matter at all, how much money they're allowed to spend on a specific Senate race, on a specific House of Representatives race, or a specific presidential race. Now, what is the obvious conclusion of all this? Well, it's going to mean that these national parties are going to dump tons and tons of money into specific swing state elections, and mostly neglect all of the other races that currently aren't really close in any regard, right? If you're in a very safe district, if your Senate seat is very safely won by 10 plus points every year, why would the National Party dump any money at all into your campaign when you've got the Tellerico versus Paxton race in Texas, for instance? That's only a 1 percentage point difference. That's basically dead even. The Republican Party now can dump an unlimited amount of money into that race and is no longer capped at $3.15 million, which means that any fundraising difference that currently exists between the two is somewhat negated by the fact that right now, Tellerico has a huge edge over Paxton. This is just one race. This is just one race for an example. Obviously, this applies to any Senate, House, or future presidential race. But the massive fundraising difference that you see between Tellerico and Paxton that previously would have given Tellerico a big advantage now can be completely taken away by the fact that the Republican Party can come in and give Paxton every dollar necessary to make up that difference. Now, one of the big reasons that this sort of a restriction existed in the first place was to make it so people can't just get around or loophole their way around the direct donation caps, right? So like I said before, there's a $7,000 cap on how much money you are allowed to donate to a specific candidate for a federal election per election cycle. Now, when this rule was in place, you couldn't just donate that $7,000 to the national party and you wouldn't know exactly where that money's going to go, right? Some of it might go to the candidate that you're wanting it to go to, but you don't have any guarantee that $7,000 or, $10,000 or $1 million or however much you're donating to the national party is going to make its way to your election of choice, right? It's going to make it to the one that you really want those dollars to go to. That's called earmarking, which is explicitly not allowed in campaign financing rules. You're not allowed to donate to the Republican Party, for instance, with the earmark of saying all of this money needs to go to the Ken Paxton race, right? That's not a thing. That's not allowed. If you remove this restriction like they have, it essentially kind of makes it so that earmarking is almost allowed. It sort of makes it so it's a null point. Because prior, if you say you were a billionaire, for instance, and you wanted to donate $100 million to the National Republican Party, you would have no guarantee that any of that money would make its way to your election of choice. Say it's Ken Paxton versus Tellerico in Texas. But you knew maybe some of it would, but you knew that they were capped at $3.15 million for that specific election, how much money they could do coordinated spending to make ads, to do signs, to do outreach, whatever they decide to is most beneficial for their campaign. But now they can dump an unlimited amount of money into it. So now essentially you could go to the Republican Party and be like, hey guys, I'm Mr. Billionaire here. I want taxes reduced. I want Paxton to really win in Texas for whatever reason. I'm going to donate you $100 million. Make sure it gets to Paxton. And that they will do that. They can now essentially do that. This is one of the biggest rulings the Supreme Court has done in a long time. I think this is going to have tremendous political implications. And I think we're going to see not only a significant increase in political donations to national parties as a result of this. What I think we're really going to see is that both parties, but I think especially so the Republican Party, are going to start dumping tons of money into specific elections that are close, that are swing states, that are where it's 50-50. The election could go either way, or places where there's fundraising deficits, like is the case with Paxton and Tellerico in Texas. This is only going to exacerbate the problem where, like, the national parties, for the most part, ignore very safe districts, safe seats in the House and the Senate, and safe districts for the presidency. They mostly don't spend all that much time or effort there, which is kind of a shame because, the vast majority of places in the United States are not contested seats. It's something only like 10 to 15% of House seats, of Senate seats are actually, and districts for presidential election are actually contested, or actually could swing one way or the other. Almost like, I think it's like 85% of all districts in the United States are very safe districts. And so this is only going to exacerbate that problem. Now there's really no incentive almost at all for these parties to dump any money into these safe areas. And not only that, it's kind of further, they have incentive to not do so. They have increased incentive to dump as much money as possible into all of these close swing state elections. So it's only going to increase the problem of tons of money being dumped into Pennsylvania, tons of money dumped into, the Texas senatorial race because, the Paxton has a huge fundraising deficit to Tellerico. And that's one of the ways that which Tellerico could actually upset him. It's going to further entrench these divides, and probably, I don't know for certain, only time will tell on this, but I think it will only increase the number of safe districts, right? It will create it so that maybe there was an area where it was kind of 50-50, but it was really only 50-50 because one side kind of struggled to do fundraising. Now, if they're able to make a fundraising parity, now it will turn what was a 50-50 district into a clear 3, 4, 5 percentage point victory or something like that. And I think this is going to have tremendous implications for the upcoming general election as well. I think especially for this election, and it's not a coincidence that they do this ruling right now. It's for the midterms, right? They're a couple of months away from the midterm elections, and there's a number of House seats and Senate seats that Republicans could potentially lose, which could have tremendous political implications for the following 2 years. before the end of Trump's term. I think that's probably the reason why they're doing this ruling now of all times, right? They see the writing on the wall politically for the midterms, and they're trying to give Republicans as best of a chance as they can, right? So that they can dump a ton of money into the Paxton race or some of these other races that they're not looking good at. Because these races, the way that they might swing Democrat is not because of like a backlash vote. It's not because of them being just naturally 50-50. It's because Republicans have been doing a very bad job in Congress, in government, and people are just not happy with this Trump administration. So yeah, here's a statement from this dissent, which was written by Kagan. And it says, Kagan argued in her dissenting opinion that the court's ruling ushers in the same opportunities for quid pro quo corruption that the contribution limits were meant to check. As a result, she wrote, a donor will be able to give a party as much as $500,000 as compared to the $7,000 he can give currently to the candidate to cover the candidate's bills, and the candidate can seek just such a donation, which is exactly what I was saying before, right? That they can essentially skirt this whole quid pro quo direct contribution limit by donating through the party, which will then be redirected directly to them. So, yeah. No bueno.